Stranded, a mostly true story from Iceland. Words by Iceland. Benediktsson. Art by Ann Wilson. Stranded, a mostly true story from Iceland. Everything in this story is true, except for one little thing. See if you can spot it. I will tell you what it is at the end. This is a story about my grandfather, how he got stranded on a volcanic island, was almost turned into a barbecue, and found the most important moment in the world. His name, like mine, was Aevar. It's a name that sounds a little bit like Ivan and a lot like eyewear, which is fitting because we both wear glasses. Our story is set in the year 1964, which by my estimation was at least 1,000 years ago. My calculations could be off. Before my grandfather became my grandfather, he was an explorer, a scientist, and a photographer in Iceland. For those who have never been, Iceland is a small and beautiful island in the middle of nowhere, right between the Greenland Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean. The summers are cool, the winters are freezing, and everything in between is, let's be honest, pretty cold and wet, but I still love it. It's a land of fairies and magic, northern lights and volcanoes. Our language is one of the oldest languages that is still spoken today. We love stories of mythical creatures like trolls and elves. The story I like most is the one about the wishing moment. It says that there is one moment every day that is filled with magic. And if you can find that single, tiny, short, and magical moment and make a wish right then, the wish will come true. One morning, my grandfather woke up, turned on the radio, and heard the greatest news he had ever heard. That is until he heard that I was writing this book, of course. A volcanic eruption, but it got better. It's huge, and even better, it's underwater. So, a brand new island is forming right next to Iceland. For most people, this news was met with the following thought. Oh, how interesting. I will observe this new development from a safe distance because, as everybody knows, volcanoes are very dangerous. For my grandfather, however, this news meant only one thing. I must go there. A few months passed. The island was now a proper island and not an extremely hot heap of molten lava. It had been named Surtsey after a fire giant from Norse mythology named Surtur. My grandfather and his friend had received special permission from the government to visit it. The volcano was still active, but they promised to be careful. To get to the island, they hitched a ride with a local fisherman, like you do, who promised to pick them up the next day. It was summer, the sun was shining, and my grandfather and his friends were excited. They were both interested in nature, they both had their cameras, and they were both certain this would be a trip to remember. They waved goodbye to the fisherman and started to explore. It was amazing! It was a brand new island, still growing, slowly filling with life. My grandfather had on his best purple boots, and since he didn't want to ruin them, he had a very strict rule for walking around Surtsey. If the bottom of your boots starts melting, you probably should be standing somewhere else, which is, when I think about it, a good rule for life in general. Not just when you're visiting an island that is more or less an active volcano. My grandfather and his friend walked around snapping photos. Day turned into night. It got pretty cold, but they kept moving, keeping themselves warm by climbing and exploring. They were so excited that they didn't sleep a wink. They just kept on taking pictures. Finally, night turned back into day. As the morning sun greeted them, they were so tired that they couldn't possibly take any more pictures. The two friends started walking back to shore. The fisherman would surely be coming shortly. Except that he didn't. My grandfather and his friend waited and waited and waited. Finally, they knew for certain the fisherman wasn't coming. And now, dear reader, I know what you are thinking. Boom, I found it. This is the one thing in the book that isn't true. Surely the fisherman was waiting for them at the shore and brought them right back home to safety. Nope. My grandfather and his friend realized they would have to stay another night on the island. But they had 4 problems. 1, they didn't have any water, only 2 bottles of juice. 2, the only food they had left was a single orange and some chocolate. 3, their coats weren't very warm and it was getting very cold. 4, the volcano was still active. Number 4 probably should have been at the top of the list. So, this is how they solved them. 1, they drank the juice. 2, they ate the orange and the chocolate. 3 and 4, they decided to sleep next to the volcano. Yes, you read that right, next to the volcano. Now I know that you are again thinking, this is the one thing in the book that is not true. I found it. Never mind the thing about the fisherman. Nope, this is also true. It happened. Even though it was summer, it was freezing cold at night, and an active volcano is the perfect thing to keep you warm, right? It really isn't. My grandfather and his friend walked as close to the running lava as they dared. The ground was very rocky, and for a moment my grandfather closed his eyes and wished he had brought his bed with him. Maybe he would get lucky and stumble upon the magic wishing moment. He opened his eyes and looked around. No such luck. When they didn't dare walk closer, they decided to set up camp. They had to be careful though, as the volcano was spitting up molten lava as high as the clouds. Their plan was simple. They found themselves a comfy spot on the rocky ground and decided to use their coats as pillows. Then, they decided that they would just take turns sleeping and watching the lava just in case the lava in the air and the running lava on the ground got too close and turned them into a human barbecue. But then, they both fell asleep. Maybe it wasn't the best plan. The morning after, they both awoke. Luckily, no one had been barbecued. The ground around them was very warm, and when my grandfather went into his coat pocket to fetch his glasses, he couldn't find them. All he could find were 2 pieces of glass and a twisted string of plastic. It took him a moment to realize his glasses had melted in the night. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Now that is the thing in the book that is not true. Nope, this is true. It really happened. Cold, thirsty, and hungry, my grandfather and his friend walked around the small island all day, waiting for the fisherman who never came. The following night, even more freezing and starving than the night before, they ventured closer to the active volcano. They laid together on their backs and watched the lava dancing in the night sky like some fire-red northern lights. My grandfather closed his eyes and wished he still had his glasses. Maybe this time he would get lucky and stumble upon the magic-filled moment of the day? He opened his eyes and looked around. No such luck. He didn't mind though. The sky was beautiful, even though it was a little blurry. The following morning, my grandfather and his friend woke up exhausted. They had now been alone on the island for more than 48 hours with hardly any food or water. Just to do something, they set their sights on a big hill in the middle of the island. Maybe they could call for help from the top? Maybe somebody on the mainland would be looking at the island with binoculars and notice them? When they were halfway up the hill, my grandfather turned to his friend and joked, "I wish that when we reach the top, we would be greeted with something to eat, maybe some nice hot soup." and he closed his eyes for the third time since they arrived on this strange and beautiful island and repeated the wish, shouting it as loud as you can shout something in your mind. My grandfather opened his eyes and looked around. No such luck. The friends laughed and kept on walking. But then, a truly wondrous thing happened. The moment they reached the top of the hill, they spotted a man walking up the other side. "Well, there you are," shouted the man happily as he reached the top. "I heard there might be some castaways stranded on the island. I'm glad I found you." My grandfather and his friend couldn't believe their eyes, especially when this mystery man reached into his backpack and pulled out a giant thermos. "You want some soup?" My grandfather and his friend looked at each other, then back at the stranger. Then they started smiling. "I guess I found it," thought my grandfather. It turned out that this mystery man was from the United States. He had come to the island earlier that morning by helicopter along with some scientists to explore. They had landed on the other side of the island, so my grandfather and his friend hadn't heard them. Some will say that this was a lucky coincidence. I say that my grandfather finally found the magic wishing moment. And yes, I know what you are thinking. Now come on, this has got to be the thing in the book that is not true. It just has to be. But no, this is also true. In the end, my grandfather and his friend arrived safely back on the mainland. They never found out why the fisherman didn't come back for them. Maybe he simply forgot. My grandfather didn't care. He was just happy he was back home. And so was my grandmother. And that is the story of how my grandfather got stranded on a volcanic island, was almost turned into barbecue, and found the most important moment in the world. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. The one thing in this extraordinary story that is not true? Yep. My grandfather's best boots weren't purple. They were green. But everything else is true. Where in the world is Iceland? Iceland is an island in the North Atlantic Ocean. Lying between North America and Europe, Iceland is known for its unique landscape with volcanoes, hot springs, and lava fields. It is the least crowded country in Europe. And what about Surtsey? Surtsey is a real place. It is approximately 20 miles off the south coast of Iceland and was formed by volcanic eruptions that took place from 1963 to 1967. It has been named a World Heritage Site, which means it is an especially important place in the natural world that must be protected. Scientists study the volcanoes, plants, and animals there to learn about how life develops on new islands. The gods of Norse mythology. The myth of the magic wishing moment is just one of many Icelandic myths. The settlers of Iceland told tales about giants, elves, and gods. Surtsey is named after Surtur, a powerful fire giant. Thor is a great warrior god whose name means thunder. Thor wields a magical hammer and is the strongest of all the Norse gods. Freya is the most famous of the Norse goddesses. She is the sister of Freyr and is in charge of love, fertility, and battle. Loki is a shapeshifter and a trickster who's the son of a giant. He sometimes helps Odin and Thor with his clever plans, but often causes trouble for them too. Odin is the Norse god of both war and death. He gave up one of his eyes in exchange for the power to see everything that happens in the world, so he is the wisest of the Norse gods. The end.